So comic book movies and television have just been getting bigger and bigger, and there's just been more and more TV shows and movies every year for the last 10ish years. Things have just been getting bigger and bigger, and this started back in 2000 with the X-Men movies first coming out, starting the first ever superhero cinematic universe, if you will, because they would end up tying in Deadpool and the Fantastic Four and all that. And I'm not getting animated, so I'm not getting the DCAU. But X-Men started off the superhero era that we are in. It didn't get big until 2012 when the Avengers came out. But just so far up until now, we've just been on a constant upward slope of just getting more and more and more. I think now, though, that with this year, we are leaving this comic book era. We are leaving this era of superhero movies and television, and we're going to start going in the opposite direction. Things are going to start spiraling downwards, and we're going to start seeing less and less, and just all around, we've come to an end of this era. I'm not going to say we've come to an end of this golden age, because for it to be a golden age, you have to already have left it. So, I couldn't objectively say we're in a comic book golden age, because you aren't supposed to know if you're in a golden age until the golden age is over. So, if this was the superhero and comic book, movie, and TV golden age, which it probably was, we're not going to know for sure until 10 or 20 years in the future when we know what movies and comic book stuff are like then. But basically, this video, I just want to talk about why I feel like we are leaving this comic book era. And there's a lot of variables to it, but the main reason is that in 2019, so many different comic book universes or cinematic universes in movies and television have either reached the point they were trying to get to, or they are just ending completely. Two universes I want to talk about are reaching the place that they've been trying to get to since the beginning of their universe. And they're still going to continue on afterwards, but it's more like a new beginning. And the other two are just ending completely. So when did this era start? Well, I believe that the current era of superhero and comic book television that we are in started in 2012 with two things being created. One was Marvel's The Avengers, the other was the TV show Arrow. Now, both of those things didn't start anything. I guess Arrow started the Arrowverse, but both of those things were very much influenced from what came before. For example, the Marvel Cinematic Universe started in 2008 with Iron Man, obviously. That only got made because Kevin Feige knew what to do. He saw how the X-Men Cinematic Universe was done. He saw how the Dark Knight trilogy was done, and he took everything he learned from the first Dark Knight movie and from the X-Men movies, and he just kind of put them together and said, this is how we're going to do the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So without the X-Men movies and Batman Begins, we probably never would have seen an X-Men or a Marvel Cinematic Universe, or at least as early as we did. Then Arrow only came along because Smallville did. If Smallville wasn't as popular as it was, they never would have tried to make Arrow. Arrow was originally supposed to be a Flash TV show, but DC were worried about letting CW use Flash that early, so they said try Arrow instead. But even at that, the Flash wouldn't have been allowed even if Smallville wasn't a thing. So without Smallville and the X-Men movies, we never would have gotten to the point of Arrow and the Avengers. But why am I starting with 2012? If the Marvel Cinematic Universe started in 2008, why not start there? Well, 2012 was where the Marvel Cinematic Universe really came together, in my opinion. It was where Marvel really knew what they were doing. It was the first year that felt like, wow, this is something big. Because the movies before Avengers, while they did well, they weren't doing crazy well. They weren't very well-known movies. They were just like, oh look, there's another superhero movie in cinemas, blah, 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 let's go see something else. Not a lot of people who weren't already comic book fans would go out of their way to see them. The Avengers was something completely different, though. The Avengers brought a ton of prior comic book superhero movies together for the first time. So people who had only seen one of the prior movies would say to their friend, oh hey look, all of these superhero movies are coming together, we should go see this. And they're like, I haven't seen the other ones, but I'll go see it anyway. That was like me. Before the Avengers, I'd only seen Captain America 1 and Thor 1. I hadn't seen the Iron Mans, and I hadn't seen the Incredible Hulk, because I was more of a DC guy until the Avengers, which made me want to know more about Marvel. And that was with a lot of people. The Avengers really made people go, wow, superhero movies are different now. Something's changed. this continued with Arrow. Arrow Season 1 was a very dark and gritty and serious TV show, and it was probably the most serious and the most gritty comic book television show or superhero television show that we had gotten to that point. Between Arrow and the Avengers, it was obvious there was a new trend in superhero and comic book movies. Things, because the Dark Knight trilogy also ended this year, but that didn't really have an effect on where comic book universe are going. I think Batman Begins had more of an effect than The Dark Knight Rises did, mainly because the DCEU was already being created by the time Dark Knight Rises came out. But while the Dark Knight trilogy was gritty and it was taken seriously, Arrow just, there was something about it, especially since it was on TV. There was kind of a thing where like comic book and superhero TV shows up until that point were always kind of cheesy and they were never really taken too seriously. Arrow was the first one that was really taken seriously. Between this and the Avengers, it was clear there was a new trend with superhero movies and just superhero comic books and TV and all that in general. And this was where the upward spiral started, in my opinion. This is where things started really ramping up. The DCU came out, the DCEU came out the following year with the DC Extended Universe, with Man of Steel. Then in 2015, we had the Marvel Netflix universe start with Daredevil, which is also a huge, important thing in comic books. Just in general, they had a huge impact on how comic book TV shows were created, and just all of this sort of stuff. But in 2019, we reached the point where all of it was kind of coming to an end. The Marvel Cinematic Universe has reached the point it's been trying to get to since Iron Man 1, and that was Avengers Endgame. Now we are kind of starting in a new beginning. We're starting in a place very similar to where we were with Iron Man 1, where we have got no idea where we're going. And it's a little bit, while it's really cool to know that we're going somewhere new, it is a little bit like, wow, where do we go now that we've gotten to the point we've been waiting to get to? The same thing is with the Arrowverse. The Arrowverse has been building to Crisis on Infinite Earths since The Flash Season 1. And they're reaching that point this year. They're reaching the end point for those shows. So from the mid-seasons on, it's going to be a very new kind of beginning where if they continue long enough, they'll be building to something new. But at the same time, after been building to this one thing for so long, it's going to be very weird to continue on after it. While I'm still going to watch the show, it's going to feel different. The Marvel Netflix shows ended this year after all being cancelled due to Disney Plus and all of that, which is another huge hit to the ongoing state of comic books and movies and TVs, and also the X-Men universe came to an end with Dark Phoenix. This is assuming New Mutants never gets released. But Dark Phoenix was the end to the X-Men universe. And these four things have been a huge staple of what we know about comic book movies and television for the last 4 or 5 years. They've been always there. There's always been a new X-Men universe movie coming out. There's always been an Arrowverse show on. There's always been a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie coming out, and there's always been a Marvel Netflix show. They've been the four things that have kind of pushed along every year. The DCEU is also there. Then you've got all the other Marvel Cinematic Universe shows, but none of them have had near of an impact on this current era we're in than these core four. And now that all of those are kind of coming to a close or they're ending where they're at, it's kind of like things are going to be different after this year. After this year, we have the DCEU really starting up. And the Marvel Cinematic Universe will be starting anew with Phase 4. There'll also still be Arrowverse shows, and there's still going to be comic book and superhero stuff, but it's going to feel different. It's not going to be the same. We're definitely heading into a new era, and it's hard to tell if that's going to be a good era or if that's going to be a disappointing era. It's possible that we are leaving the golden age of superheroes and comic books, and it's going to be very disappointing to transition into a new era where we don't like what we're seeing, where we're a little bit disappointed and let down by what we're seeing. I hope that's not the case. I hope the next era we're going into is really, really, really unique. I hope it's fun. I hope Marvel knows not to milk things like Endgame and they really start something new. On top of that, it's possible DC is finally getting its due in this new era. Maybe we were just in the Marvel era, and maybe now we're moving into the DC era, which I'd be completely okay with. Because the DCEU is finally starting up again after a huge rocky couple years between Aquaman, Shazam, Wonder Woman, and the current slate they have. It seems like things are in a bright future for DC, and I wouldn't mind an era where they're the king instead of Marvel. Maybe a little back and forth even. But yeah, that's just me saying that I believe that this era of superhero television and movies is over. But what do you think? Do you think that this era is over, or do you think we're heading into a new one, or do you think we're still in the era? Maybe there's stuff coming out that you think can still be tied into the golden age of comic books and all that. But I hope you really liked this video. I hope you're having an awesome day. And please like and subscribe and share and all that if you did enjoy this. Thank you for watching.